Hello, folks, wherever you are, whatever time it is. Welcome. I'm Andy Oliver, the Minister of Pastoral Care, and I need to confess a sin that I committed last Thursday night. Now, usually when preachers want to confess a sin, people start to perk up because usually they think it's about sex, and God knows in America we like to perk up when it comes to sex, and let's just face it, most of the time when pastors confess a sin, it's about sex. Alas, for those of you who were wanting something more salacious, this is not a sin about sex. So last Thursday night, I committed a racist action. I need to tell you about it. See, last Thursday night, I was recording our Ash Wednesday service, which will be broadcast on Wednesday, the 17th of February, and I hope you participate in it. During the recording, I'm reading a part in the worship called The Invitation, an irony you shall see, the invitation to the Lenten journey, as in, hey everybody, regardless of the color of your skin, come participate in this 40-day season to prepare us for Easter. That's the general idea. The hope is that the season of Lent is a time of deep reflection about not only our mortality, but also about our sin. That we need to confess and be honest about the things we do wrong, or the good things we didn't do right when they needed to be done. And this is in preparation for receiving the good news of the resurrected Christ at Easter, who overcame death and sin, offering forgiveness, which of course we cannot receive if we do not acknowledge that we sin. Anywho, back to my sin of racism. I'm reading the invitation and I read these words, quote, "The world around us is unrelenting in its reminders of death and darkness." I read it just like that without batting an eye. I could have said the world around us is unrelenting in its reminders of death and sin. Or I could have said the world around us is unrelenting in its reminders of death and hatred, or death and lovelessness, death and violence. But I used the word darkness instead, as if darkness is a bad thing. In fact, I used the word darkness as a substitute for the word sin. I recently read a book by the Reverend Lenny Duncan, who is a black preacher living in Vancouver. The book is called Dear Church, a love letter from a black preacher to the whitest denomination in the U.S. One of the things that Reverend Duncan does in the book is highlight the way that white or white-led congregations like ours often engage in racism in unreflective, though not exclusively unreflective, ways without even noticing or thinking about it. As a black preacher, Reverend Duncan notices, and he wrote about it. One of the things he wrote about is to do with the way the church uses the language of light and dark, where light stands in for something good and dark stands in for something bad, like sin. He says that such language is racist and is one of the reasons people with darker skin do not come to church in such white congregations. Why would they want to be in a place that keeps on saying black, dark, absence of white is bad? Anywho, back to my racism. My sin was not that not only did I use the word darkness in reference to something that was bad, it was also that I did not say anything about it when it happened. As in, I was sitting in the chapel with the other folks there to record the service, and I felt this inner pressure, which was my own, a pressure not placed there by anyone else in the room, all of whom were very gracious to me. I know for a fact that they were gracious to me when it came to the amount of time things were taking, because there was another part of the service where I messed up when I was supposed to stand somewhere and I didn't, and we had to have another take, and everyone in the room was very gracious about doing a second take. And yet, despite their graciousness, I still didn't take the time to say, hey, can we talk about the use of the word darkness? In light of all the racism white people in our country have been noticing this past year, finally, I'm thinking the use of the word darkness instead of sin is problematic, especially when we use it as an invitation, hence the aforementioned sadly ironic use of the word darkness in the part of liturgy where we want all people to participate in. But I did not do this. I did not do this because I felt an inner pressure to complete the recording, and if I'm being completely honest, which of course is what Lent is supposed to be about, I did not want to make other people, or to be more clearly, I didn't want to make myself uncomfortable. And that is the sin. I knew it was wrong and I didn't say anything about it because I was scared. Why am I saying this now? First, because Christians have to tell the truth. Second, this is the only devotional I will record before Ash Wednesday on February 17th, and I hope you participate in it. And And I want you to notice that part in the service, in addition to all this part of the service. Third, we are currently in the season that the church calls Epiphany, where we set aside a number of weeks between Christmas and Lent, or Christmas and Christmas and Lent, to speak of Jesus in positive, glowing terms as the light of the world. Fourth, there was another black man whose name was Jonah Donald, who was shot by police officers in my hometown of Vancouver during a traffic stop just a few hours after I recorded the Ash Wednesday service, and it's made me think and reflect more. I say another black man because just a few months ago the police shot and killed another black man named Kevin Peterson. Vancouver, Washington, where I live, has less than 2% of a black population, meaning all black men, women, and children in the whole city. So there's not very many black men who even live here, which is a whole larger story of historic racism. There are not a lot of shootings by the police where I live. So for black men to be the one shot and killed by the police involves race and the complexity of racism. And how can I even address racism in my own city if I'm not even willing to address my own racism? Usually when an ethical decision needs to be made, we have to make it in the moment, quickly, unexpectedly. There's no time to deliberate. Or we think there's no time to deliberate when there really is time. I believe that you watching this video and myself need the church for many reasons. One of them is that we need a community who will form us to make the just decisions in the moment. We need our hearts, our habits to be shaped before a decision is necessary. We need accountability when we do not do it right. We need each other to confess and tell the truth. And we need love to restore us back to the fold. We need each other. Jesus says to all his followers at the same time in a group, not privately one-on-one, Jesus says in Matthew 28 that his followers, that is his church, they are made, they are not born. We have to be made into followers of Jesus, made into disciples of Jesus, and it takes a church to do it. The word darkness used by the church as a metaphor, illustration, definition, or substitute for sin is an extremely problematic term for white American congregations to use. It will be hard to change. The word and image of darkness as something negative is all over the Bible. Even Jesus uses the language of dark and light, with dark being bad and light being good. In a conversation with a religious leader named Nicodemus, Jesus says, quote, "And this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world," meaning himself, "and people love darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil." This conversation takes place in the night, which has been interpreted as a negative thing, as in Nicodemus didn't want anyone to see him. But the story doesn't say that. It doesn't say what Nicodemus's motivations were. We label it as bad. Later in John's Gospel, Nicodemus, in full public view at great risk to himself and to his religious community, helps to prepare Jesus' body for burial after Jesus' execution by state officers. A risk Nicodemus would not have taken had he not had his nighttime conversation, because sometimes God does her best work at night in the dark. If we're going to use the word darkness as a substitute for sin, then let's at least have a theological conversation about it. Do a word study, maybe engage in some textual criticism, and maybe we need to put an asterisk by the word darkness whenever we use it as a stand-in for something bad. Consider this video as my asterisk. God does his best work in the night, during the dark, like being born in the world, for one. And in the beginning, in the book of Genesis, we are told that God created both day and night, and he called them both good. Amen.